On Christmas Eve, a frozen widow and her baby begged for shelter at his gate. The axe was already in my hand when I heard it. Not the wind, I knew the wind by then, 3 winters in that valley, knew every pitch it made coming off the ridge above the tree line, knew the one that meant snow by morning and the different one that meant snow right now. This wasn't either of those. This was something underneath the wind, a sound the wind was carrying, not making. I set the axe head on the chopping block and stood still. There it was again, coming from the direction of the south gate, down by the road, which wasn't much of a road, 2-wheel ruts frozen hard since October, running west toward the Brennan Spread and east toward nothing useful for about 11 miles. Nobody came down that road in December. Nobody had business out here in December. I'd gone 2 full weeks without seeing another human face, and I hadn't missed it. I pulled my coat off the peg by the barn door and walked down. She was on her knees in the snow just outside the gate. I didn't know that's what I was seeing at first. I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer that had come down wrong on the icy ground, maybe a dog somebody had put out. The light was already going at that hour, the sky that particular gray-purple it gets in the last 20 minutes before dark, and she was bundled so heavy that the shape of her didn't read as human until I got within about 30 feet. Then I saw the gate post she was gripping with one hand, saw her head come up, and she looked at me. The other arm she was holding against her chest, pressed in close, the way you hold something you mean to keep. I got the gate open. She couldn't stand all the way up, her legs had gone partly out from under her, I think from the cold or from how long she'd been walking, and I grabbed her elbow and got her up, and my first thought, the one I'm not proud of, was that this was going to be complicated. My second thought came when I heard what she was holding make a sound. Not a cry, more like the beginning of one, cut short. The way a baby sounds when it's too cold to finish what it started. I stopped thinking about complicated. I got her inside. Sat her in the chair closest to the stove, the old split-bottom rocker that had been there when I bought the place, that I'd never gotten rid of because there was no reason to. She wouldn't let go of the bundle even to get her coat off, so I worked the coat loose around her without pulling, opened it back, and the baby was inside her dress, pressed against her skin. Weeks old, maybe. Small in a way that made my chest do something it hadn't done in a long time. I got the stove fed, got water heating, found the lamp and got it lit because the dark had finished coming down while I was working and neither of us had noticed. Her name was Cora Fisk. She told me that later, when her mouth was working right again. Her husband, a man named August Fisk, who I had never heard of and couldn't place, had died of a fever 6 weeks prior, before the worst of the cold came, in a settlement 12 miles east that I can't call a town without being generous about it. She'd stayed as long as she could, run out of wood in November, then run out of the last of what passed for food. She'd been walking since 2 days before, stopping where she could, sleeping, if you could call it that, in a hay shed one night, in the lee of a cutbank the second night, moving again this morning before full light. 12 miles in December with a 6-week-old baby, because there was nowhere else to go. I heated broth from the pot I kept going on the back of the stove, nothing fancy, just bones and dried onion, but it was hot, and watched her drink it with both hands around the cup, the baby across her thighs, both of them coming back into themselves by degrees the way things do when the cold has had them for a while. Her hair had frozen at the edges where it came out from under her hat. I didn't say anything about that. Didn't say much of anything. I'm not a man who fills quiet with words. She looked up at me once, over the rim of the cup, and I saw she was expecting me to tell her she couldn't stay. I'd been alone in that house for going on a year. Before that, 2 years at the claim on the Platte that didn't amount to anything. Before that, 4 years of trail work and contract freighting that had taken me from Missouri to the Montana Territory and back again, and had left me with a good horse, a sound rifle, a working knowledge of the country between the Yellowstone and the Republican, and very little else. I knew what I was. A man who had useful skills and no softness and nothing particular waiting for him anywhere. A man who had learned not to expect much in the way of his own happiness and had made his peace with that. But I knew what she was too, and I knew what was outside that door. "There's a room at the back," I said. "It's cold, but I can get it warm." She looked at me for a moment, then she looked back down at the baby. "My name is Harlan Cole," I said. "You're safe here." She didn't say thank you. I didn't need her to. That first night I slept in the barn, or tried to. Not out of any misplaced notion of propriety. We were both well past the age where that kind of thing needs stating. I slept out there because the back room was the only room with a door, and I wanted her to be able to close it. Wanted her to know she could. I lay in the straw with my coat over me, and listened to the wind pick up the way I'd known it would, and I thought about August Fisk, a man I'd never met, dying of fever in a settlement east of nowhere 6 weeks before Christmas. Leaving a woman and a newborn with no wood and no food and nothing to do but wait and then walk. I didn't feel sorry for him exactly. I don't know what I felt, but I thought about him for a while before I slept. In the morning she was up before me. I came in from the barn and she'd already gotten the stove going from the wood box inside. She'd found the coffee, such as it was, and had it heating. She was standing at the window with the baby on her shoulder, watching the snow that had come in the night, not looking at me when I came through the door. "I can work," she said, without turning around, "for whatever room and board is." "All right," I said. She turned then, and I think she'd been expecting an argument, or conditions, or at least a conversation about it. I didn't have one ready. What she'd said was straightforward, and what I'd said was straightforward, and that was the end of it, as far as I was concerned. She worked, that's the plain truth of it. She wasn't 2 days recovered from what would have killed most women before she was cleaning the place, which needed it. I am not a dirty man, but I am a solitary one, and solitary men let things go in ways they don't notice until someone else notices for them. She found the mending pile I'd been ignoring since September. She took stock of the larder with a cook's eye and started making what was there go further than I'd been making it go. She did all of this quietly, without commentary, the baby in a sling she fashioned from an old flour sack, close against her while she moved. I watched her some of the time, when I thought she wasn't watching me. She was maybe 24, 25. Dark eyes and a stillness to her that wasn't meekness. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't that she'd been worn down to quiet. It was that she'd thought carefully about what was worth saying and what wasn't, and she'd come to some conclusions. Her husband's dying had something to do with that, I expect. The walk had something to do with it, but I think some of it was just who she was. The baby's name was Thomas, Tom, 8 weeks old when she'd knocked on my gate post in the dark. He was a serious child, even at that age. Watched things. Watched me specifically with the absolute attention that infants give to faces, that focused not quite seeing that means they're taking you apart and deciding what you are. I'd been around babies some, had a sister who'd had several, but I'd not been the one any of them focused on for long. Tom seemed to find me interesting. I told myself it was just because I was new. I did not pick him up for the first 2 weeks, not because I didn't want to, because I wasn't sure I knew how to still, and because if I'd done it wrong I'd have felt like a fool, and Cora Fisk struck me as a woman who noticed things. There was a man named Gruder. I should say something about Gruder because he comes into this. Theodore Gruder had a spread about 4 miles north, ran cattle on land that was half his by deed and half his by the kind of habit that passes for ownership on a frontier where nobody's been keeping close track. He was not a bad man in the ways that count for the worst things. But he was the kind of man who believes that want is the same thing as right, and he'd had his eye on the 40 acres between my south fence and the river since before I'd filed my claim on them. He'd been patient about it the way a man is patient when he thinks it's only a matter of time. He came calling in the 2nd week of January. I saw him from the barn, crossing the yard on that big gray horse of his, and I set down what I was doing and watched him a moment before I went inside. He didn't know she was there yet. Nobody did, or nobody who would have made anything of it. We were remote enough for that. I went inside ahead of him. Cora was at the table, feeding Tom, and she looked up when I came in, read something in my face, and didn't ask. "Someone coming," I said. "A neighbor. He's all right mostly, but if you'd rather take Tom to the back room, I'll understand." She thought about it for about a second and a half. "I'll stay," she said. Gruder came in, stomped the snow off, took in the room in the way men do when they're trying not to look like they're taking in the room. He was polite enough, talked weather, talked the late price on beef, asked after the condition of the south fence in what he thought was a casual way. I answered everything at the same pace he asked it, which was slow, because Gruder liked to control the timing of a conversation, and I had learned some years ago that the best response to that is not to hurry. When he looked at Cora, I saw him revising something in his head. "Didn't know you had family," he said. "I do now," I said. He looked at me. I looked at him. He looked at Cora again, and she was watching him in that still way she had, the baby in her arms, not performing anything, not trying to charm him or placate him or make anything easier, just looking at him the way she looked at things she was taking apart and deciding about. Gruder left without getting to whatever he'd come for regarding the South 40. When the door closed behind him, Cora didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "He'll be back." "Yes," I said, "he will." "Will that be a problem?" "I thought about that for a count or two. For him, maybe," I said. She didn't smile exactly, but something in her face changed in a way that meant something. "The baby got sick in February. I want to be honest about what those 3 days were. I don't talk about them, but I want to be honest. It came on fast, the way it does with the small ones. One evening he was fine, or as fine as February on the high plains gets, and by the middle of the night his breathing had gone wrong. Cora had him doing what she could do, what she knew how to do, and I stood in the doorway of that back room at 2 in the morning watching her, and understanding that I was useless here in the way I was not used to being useless. I had built this house. I had stocked it. I had kept the fire going and the wolves off the south fence and Gruder and his ambitions at a manageable distance. None of that was any help right now. She looked up at me from the floor where she was sitting, Tom wrapped and pressed to her chest, and her face told me she knew the same thing. "There's a woman in the Brennan settlement," I said. "A healer. A Mexican woman, Doña Petra. She comes up in spring, but she winters there. 8 miles. Cora looked at me. "I'll go," I said. It was well below freezing, dark and windy, and the snow from the last storm hadn't packed well, which meant the horse would be breaking through the crust every third stride. 8 miles. I didn't think about whether it was a good idea. I thought about what I needed to take and how long it would take and what I'd ask for when I got there. I went. I won't give you the whole 8 miles. It took a long time. The horse, which was a good horse, did what good horses do, which is keep going. When I got to the settlement, I got Doña Petra out of her sleep without ceremony and explained in the Spanish I had, which was serviceable, what was happening, and she read the situation in the way healers do from the description alone, and told me what to bring and what to do, and I waited while she put together a small parcel of what she had, and I rode back. I don't know the time, late enough to early again. The kitchen lamp was still burning when I came across the yard. Tom was still alive. He was bad, but alive. Doña Petra had told me to make a steam, hot water in a bowl, the baby's face over it, the whole thing tented under a blanket to hold the vapor. I told Cora, and she looked at me like I was somebody she was seeing for the first time, and we did it together for the rest of that night, trading off when one of us got too tired, not talking much, the lamp burning low and the stove going hard, and the steam rising in that small room. By morning the breathing had eased. I went out to see to the horse, which had earned some consideration, and when I came back and Cora was sitting at the kitchen table with Tom asleep in her arms and her head down. Not asleep but not far from it, and she had been crying, or had been recently. I could tell from the set of her shoulders, not from any sound she was making. I sat down across from her. After a while she looked up at me. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Her voice was rough from the night. "No," I said. She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "Why did you?" I thought about that, thought about whether I could answer it plainly, the way she'd asked it. "Because he's yours," I said, "and you're here." She held my eyes for a while after that. I don't know exactly what she was deciding, but I knew she was deciding something. Spring came the way it does up there, not all at once, but in corrections. A week of warmth, then a hard freeze, then 3 days of mud, then cold again, and then one morning you step outside and something has changed for good and you can smell it, the difference between the cold that will come back and the cold that has let go. I had been thinking about the South 40. Not in the way Gruder thought about it, not as a thing to hold or gain, more like a question I kept having about what I was building and what for. I had come to this valley because the land was available and cheap, and I knew how to work land, and for a year that had been sufficient. A man needs a project, but a project is not the same thing as a purpose. I was fixing fence on the north side in early April when Cora came out from the house and walked across the field toward me. She didn't often come to find me. She had enough to do, and so did I, and we had settled into a way of being near each other that didn't require a lot of seeking out. So when she crossed the field, I put the post-hole digger down. She stopped a few feet away and looked at the fence line. "Gruder was here this morning," she said, "while you were out." I waited. "He made a proposition," she said. "Said he had an offer on the South 40, said the offer was to me." I kept my face still. "What kind of offer?" "The kind a man makes when he thinks a woman is looking for a way out," she said. She said it flatly, without heat, as a piece of information. He was not rude about it. He was careful not to be rude. "I see." She looked at me then. Looked at me in the direct way she had, the way that meant she'd already thought through what she was going to say. "I told him the South 40 wasn't mine to discuss," she said. "I told him he'd have to speak to you." "All right." "I also told him that if he came to the house again when you weren't here, I'd shoot him." I looked at her. "I wasn't being dramatic," she said. "I was being clear." I turned that over. "You have a gun." "I have yours, the one on the peg inside the door." She held my eyes. "You might want to know I can use it. My father ran a stock operation in Nebraska. I'm not careless." I nodded. I believed her. We stood there for a moment in the April wind, the fence post between us, Tom somewhere back in the house, and I was aware that something was being negotiated that neither of us had stated directly. That was all right. I've never been a man who needed the words out loud to know what was happening. "You could leave in spring," I said. Carefully, because it needed saying and because she needed to know I knew it. "If you wanted to, you've made it this far, you're not beholden." She looked at me. "I know that. I'm saying so in case it was in question." "It isn't," she said. "I know what I owe and what I don't." A pause. "I don't want to leave," she said. I picked up the post-hole digger, looked down the fence line, thought about what I was going to say and whether I was going to say it right. "Then stay," I said. "If you want to stay, stay." She stayed. We were not quick about it. I want to be clear about that too, because it matters to how it happened. She had been a wife. She had grieved a man. I had been alone long enough that I'd stopped thinking of the condition as temporary. Neither of us was in a hurry to name anything, and we were both the kind of people who need a thing to be true before we'll say it. So we let it be true first. We let the spring happen, and the summer and the fall. Tom grew, got solid, started pulling himself up on things, furniture edges and fence rails and the legs of my trousers while I was trying to do something else. He had his mother's eyes and his own particular opinions about what was interesting, and what he found most interesting still was me. He'd watch me work for half an hour without making a sound, not fidgeting, just watching, in a way I can only describe as attentive, like he was filing things away. I started picking him up in April. He was 4 months old, or close enough, and I picked him up one morning when Cora was busy with something and he needed settling, and he grabbed my collar with one fist and looked at me with that serious face of his, and I thought, all right, we both know what this is. I told him so, quietly, so nobody else would hear me talking to an infant in that particular way. I told him his daddy was a man I'd never met, and I was sorry about that, and I was going to do right by him. I was not sure I'd be any good at it, but I was going to do right by him. He grabbed my shirt collar tighter. I took that for agreement. Gruder came back, as Cora had predicted he would. He came in June, with a man I didn't recognize, and he came to the front gate this time, and he sat his horse and called for me without getting down, the way a man does when he's already decided the conversation is going to go a certain way. I came out of the barn and walked to the gate and looked up at him. "Still saying no on the South 40, he said, not a question. "Still saying no," I said. He looked at the man beside him, and the man beside him looked at me. I'd had a few of those kinds of looks over the years. I was not particularly interested in this one. "Things could get complicated," Gruder said. "The way men say it when they want you to understand they mean something without saying the specific thing." "They could," I said. Cora came out of the house then. She came across the yard slowly, carrying Tom, and she stopped a few feet behind me and to my left. She didn't say anything. She just stood there. Gruder looked at her, looked at me, looked at the man beside him again. I don't know what he'd expected. Maybe he'd thought she'd leave, or that the situation was less settled than it was. Maybe he'd thought a woman and a baby were a pressure point. He was wrong about that. She wasn't a pressure point. She was the reason the whole thing was simple. "The South 40's not for sale," I said. "The conversation's done." He looked at me for another moment. Then he pulled his horse around and the other man followed him, and they rode back toward the north without making anything of it, because there was nothing to make of it and he knew it now. I heard her exhale behind me, not in relief exactly, more like the release of a decision made. I turned around. She was looking at me, Tom on her hip, and there was something in her face that she'd kept back until now, kept back through the winter and the spring and all of it, and she let me see it. Just for a moment. Steady and plain, the way she did things. I took the 2 steps and put my hand against her face, and she leaned into it just slightly and didn't look away. Tom grabbed my sleeve. In October we rode to the Brennan settlement, the 3 of us, and did it formally, with Reverend Bates officiating in his kitchen, because the church had a rotten board in the floor and he was waiting on lumber. It was not a ceremony that took long. Cora was wearing a blue dress I had not seen before. She'd made it from cloth she'd traded something for without telling me. And she stood next to me in that kitchen with Tom in one arm and looked at the Reverend, and answered the questions asked of her with the same clear, deliberate calm she brought to everything she did. When he was done, she looked at me. I'd been looked at in a lot of ways over the years, by men who wanted something from me, by men who were trying to figure out whether I was a problem for them, by country and weather and circumstance, all of which have ways of looking at a man. This was different. This was a woman who had walked 12 miles in December with nothing left, who had come out the other side of that, who had made herself useful and capable and whole in a house that had needed all 3, who had stood behind me at a gate when she could have stayed inside, who had watched me ride 8 miles in the cold for her child, and had not pretended it was nothing or made it into more than it was. A woman who had chosen, carefully, with her eyes open, knowing what she was choosing. She was looking at me like I was the thing she'd decided on, not the safe choice, the right one. I'm not going to tell you I know what I did to deserve that. I'm not sure deserve is even the right word for it, but I know what it felt like to be looked at that way by a woman like that. I know what it does to a man who's been a long time not being looked at that way at all. We rode back in the afternoon with the sky going orange over the ridge and Tom asleep between us on the saddle, slumped against my arm, and Cora rode with her shoulder touching mine, and we didn't say much for the last few miles. Didn't need to. The house was lit when we came over the hill. I'd left a lamp in the window. I always did, even when there'd been no one to come home to. Force of habit or something that wasn't quite habit, something more like hope, kept so quiet for so long I'd almost stopped knowing I had it. She saw it before I did, the light, looked at it for a moment, then looked at me. Good, she said, soft, just that one word. I wrote us in. The South 40 was ours. The house was ours. The land ran to the ridge and the river, and it was enough, more than enough for men who know what enough means. I sit here now some years further on, and I think about that gate in the dark, the sound that wasn't the wind, the shape that wasn't an animal, the way she looked up at me from the snow with that one arm gripping the post and the other one pressed in close, holding the thing she meant to keep. I think about what kind of man doesn't open that gate. And I think about what kind of man I turned out to be by opening it. I still light the lamp when the dark comes down.